Gidevaradari. Gopijana Vallabha Gidevaradari. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Yamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopijana Vallabha Gidevaradari. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Yamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Go Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Gora Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Gora Hari Bo. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Vishnupada Paramahansa Pribhaja Acharya Ashtotarashta Srimad Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda ki Jai Gaur Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glory to Shri Guru, Shri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Very appropriate introductory mantra to the Bhagavatam. Same one that Dhruva Maharaj is chanting. So. Reading today Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th canto, 8th chapter, text number 61. Virakta Chandriyarattao Bhakti Yogena Bhuyasa Tam Nirantara Bhavina Vajitadha Vimuktaye. Viraktas Chandriyarattao Bhakti Yogena Bhuyasa Tam Nirantara Bhavina Vajitadha Vimuktaye. Viraktas Chandriyarattao Bhakti Yogena Bhuyasa Tam Nirantara Bhavina Vajitadha Vimuktaye. Viraktas Chandriyarattao Bhakti Yogena Bhuyasa Tam Nirantara Bhavina Vajitadha Vimuktaye. Viraktas Chandriyarattao Bhakti Yogena Bhuyasa Tam Nirantara Bhavina Vajitadha Vimuktaye. Viraktas Chandriyarattao Bhakti Yogena Bhuyasa Tam Nirantara Bhavena Vajitadha Vimuktaye. Viraktaschandriyarato Bhakti Yogena Bhujasa Nirantara Bhavina Vajitadha Vimuktaye Viraktaschandriyarato Bhakti Yogena Bhujasa Nirantara Bhavena Vachitadha Vimuktaye Virakta Cha, completely renounced order of life. Indriya Rata, in the matter of sense gratification. Bhakti Yogena, by the process of devotional service. Bhuyasa, with great seriousness. Tam, unto him, the Supreme. Nirantara, constantly, 24 hours daily. Bhavena, in the topmost stage of ecstasy. Bhajita, must worship. Adha, directly. Vimuktaye, for liberation. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. If one is very serious about liberation, he must stick to the process of transcendental loving service, engaging 24 hours a day in the highest stage of ecstasy, and he must certainly be aloof from all activities of sense gratification. Everyone can please repeat. If one is very serious about liberation, he must stick to the process of transcendental loving service, engaging 24 hours a day in the highest stage of ecstasy. And he must be aloof from all activities of sense gratification. Purport. There are different stages of perfection according to different persons' objectives. Generally, people are karmis, for they engage in activities of sense gratification. Above the karmis are the jnanis, who are trying to become liberated from material entanglement. Yogis are still more advanced because they meditate on the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And above all these are the devotees, who simply engage in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. They are situated seriously on the topmost platform of ecstasy. Here, Dhruva Maharaj is advised that if he has no desire for sense gratification, then he should directly engage himself in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. The path of apavarga, or liberation, begins from the stage called moksha. In this verse, the word vimuktaye, for liberation, is especially mentioned. If one wants to be happy within this material world, he may aspire to go to different material planetary systems where there is a higher standard of sense gratification. But real moksha, or liberation, is performed without any such desire. This is explained in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu by the term anya bilashita shunyam, without desire for material sense gratification. For persons who are still inclined to enjoy material life in different stages or on different planets, the stage of liberation in Bhakti Yoga is not recommended. Only persons who are completely free from the contamination of sense gratification can execute Bhakti Yoga, or the process of devotional service, very purely. The activities on the path of Apavarga, up to the stage of Dharma, Artha, and Kama, are meant for sense gratification. But when one comes to the stage of moksha, the impersonalist liberation, the practitioner wants to merge into the existence of the Supreme. But that is also sense gratification. When one goes above the stage of liberation, however, he at once becomes one of the associates of the Lord to render transcendental loving service. That is technically called vimukti. For this specific vimukti liberation, Narada Muni recommends that one directly engage himself in devotional service. Om Ajnanatimidandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakada Mahyam Darati Swa Vadantikam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Dishatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivashari Gaur Bhaktivinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So Narada Muni is giving his last instructions. I think the next verse is the last instruction. No. This verse is the last instruction. To Dhruva Maharaj. His instructions reflect in a very unique and similar way to the way that Srila Prabhupada has instructed us. Otherwise, Dhruva Maharaj is desiring, you can't have a much bigger desire than to want to have a bigger kingdom than the universe. It's pretty big material desire. Some of us want a 5-bedroom house or a Lexus or something, but this is way up there, and still Narada Muni is recommending pure devotional service, but understanding that Dhruva Maharaj is on the his whole search for the Supreme Personality of Godhead is born out of anger and frustration. Of course, the whole material world is designed like that, so that we can, through anger, frustration, complication, the constant onslaught of Maya, defeating every desire and every attempt to enjoy this material world, we finally come to the point of trying to take up devotional service. Muchukunda spoke one verse which I forgot, where he says that after one travels to the material world for so long, then they come to the point where, out of frustration, they meet with the devotees. And by the mercy of the devotees, they're elevated to the platform of devotional service. Of course, Jiva Goswami, he he explains that in a very unique way. He says that actually you cannot get the association of devotees through any mechanical means or just by becoming frustrated with material energy. But by being frustrated with material energy, actually he says first, the devotees, you just get their association by mercy, but that mercy may be extended to you if you are frustrated with material energy. Otherwise you may be looking, just like many devotees came to devotional service through practicing some kind of yoga or meditation, etc. That was my case, because I practiced yoga out of frustration, and seeing that all my plans were not working out. And then finally, I met a devotee, and Krishna was merciful, very merciful in my case. So, but still he gives the highest. So Srila Prabhupada, we can see now, especially nowadays, when Srila Prabhupada began his movement, or carrying on Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement, devotees, there was only one thing to do, which was surrender. You just had to surrender to the temple. There was no congregational program. That was it. There was only two kinds of people. Of course, Krishna says that in Bhagavad Gita. There are demons and devotees, but we had it very clearly black and white marked. What is a demon? A devotee means you live in the temple and you go out on Sankirtan every day, or you cook for the devotee. Otherwise, you're fully engaged, and otherwise you're a demon. So now it's a little more. There's a larger gray area, where you're in between, or you're a devotee. But here, Srila Prabhupada defines devotee, and of course the verse itself defines what is a devotee, and Srila Prabhupada quotes it. He says, above all of these, above the karmis, above the jnanis, above the yogis, there are the devotees. And how does Srila Prabhupada define devotee? Who simply engage in transcendental loving service of the Lord. They are situated seriously on the topmost platform of ecstasy. So sometimes we even use the term devotee very loosely. If we go by this definition here in the first paragraph of the purport, then many of us might be left in the wake of Srila Prabhupada's definition. But just like Srila Prabhupada gave the names of those who are not initiated, Bhakta, Bhakta so-and-so, he was elevating us because, sometimes we say Bhakta Prasad, he's not like just joining the temple. He's like on this platform. And so, just like when Satyaraj Khan asked Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, what is the hope for those like myself who are engaged in family life and material activities? What is the hope for us? And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Krishna Seva, Vaishnava Seva, Harinam, Nirantara Harinam Sankirtan. That you serve Krishna, you serve the devotees, and you constantly chant the holy name of the Lord. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has confirmed that Kirtaniya Sada Hari. We always have to be engaged in chanting the holy name, which means whenever we're not chanting on beads or chanting in kirtan, every activity we perform should be glorifying Krishna. Some people ask, especially in India, this is the most common question I get. But how will I maintain my family? How can I? But actually, that can also be done in the same way, because if a devotee is exemplary even in the workplace, they're exemplary. their attitude, they show signs of complete satisfaction. They will be preaching to others. I personally had that experience, not by being elevated, but just by having the desire to serve Krishna. I went into the army, and I had met the devotees, but I wasn't practicing. Then there was, then I found Bhagavad Gita in the library. Totally frustrated. I was at the maximum degree. I couldn't have been more frustrated. I probably could have, but I couldn't conceive of being more frustrated. Being thrust into the army, having to, on my periscope was Vietnam, and then all of a sudden I found Bhagavad Gita, and I remembered Vishnu Jan Swami had distributed a Back to Godhead magazine to me, and so I found the Bhagavad Gita, and 3 days later I met a devotee. I mean, he was like very new, but he said, he together with the Bhagavad Gita destroyed all of my desire for some other type of yoga. When I took the Bhagavad Gita that I had and compared it to Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, and the one I had, I didn't react to it. I just put it aside. And then I started reading Bhagavad Gita. I read it all the way through without stopping, just rested a little bit. And I didn't even go, I got chastised because I didn't go out. I hid, and I just read Bhagavad Gita. And then I just kept reading it. And I thought, well, here I am in the army. Arjuna's also, he's a soldier, so I guess it's not so bad. And then I just became, I read about duty, so I have to do this duty. And it was just amazing how Bhagavad Gita reacted. Then the captain of that, my captain of my platoon, because I was getting up at 3 a.m, everybody was throwing beer cans and everything at me, because there's no rooms, you just have a little 3.5-foot wall, little wall between all the like little cubicles, so people know. And then the captain came up and said, I need to speak with you. And I thought he's going to chastise me. I'm waking everybody up. He said, you don't belong here. And I said, well, I couldn't agree with you more. And he said, I see you have a lot of religious books. I was looking at one of them, Bhagavad Gita. He said, it's very good. He said, I think that I'm going to transfer you to the chaplain's office. And he said, and I read in there that vegetarian. I said, I hope you don't mind me reading your book. I said, no, go ahead. I'll get you another one. And then he said, I see that you're supposed to be vegetarian, so you can't eat here. So therefore, I'm going to give you separate rations. And you can't live with these people, and therefore I'm going to give you separate housing. And then I went to the chaplain's office, and the chaplain liked me very much. And he said, you work very efficiently. Everybody else is trying not to work, and you're doing like 10 times more than everyone else. So therefore, you don't have to come. I'll just call you whenever I need you. So it was like I would go in 2 or 3 times a week. I rented a little farm with mango trees and nice chiku and all kinds of fruits, a little river. And so Krishna arranged everything. Just by, so the point is that then I would go and everybody would ask me, why are you happy? This is miserable. And then Rameshwar Prabhu at that time, he sent me, he said, you should do Sankirtan. I said, what's that? And he said, you distribute books. So he sent me like 20 boxes of books. And every time somebody said, why are you happy? I say, take this. This will make you happy. Even when people were waiting for the chaplain, they're waiting for like an interview to reveal their mind or something. I would say, whatever you're going to learn in there, or whatever advice you're going to get, you can find it condensed right here in this book. And the chaplain caught me doing that. And he said, you can't do that. They're coming in for Christian, orientation. And I said, couldn't this be classified as religious discrimination? I'm just giving them an option. I'm not telling them not to see you. So he said, all right, go ahead. And then he got a Bhagavad Gita. And he said, this is a good book. This is a good book. So the point is that just by, even though I was in you can't think of probably a place of less attraction to devotional service than the army. The language and the mentality of the people was not very elevated. But yet, because people could see, they were frustrated, and they could see I was not frustrated like them, then they all would ask me questions, and I would give them a book. So even if one is in a workplace or whatever, just one can be kirtaniya sadahari. One can be engaged, and even in that so-called mundane activity, as Rupa Goswami says, nikilasyasya vastasu. Even though one may be working like others in this material world, iha yasya herer dasye. If you want to practice devotional service in this world, karmana manasa gira, you must dedicate your activities, your words, and your thoughts totally to Krishna. Then even though it may appear you're like everyone else, jivan mukta sa uchate, you are liberated. So at least liberated from some aspects of material life. So Srila Prabhupada describes throughout his books, some people become frustrated. And that frustration, just like it says in the beginning here, different stages of performing a perfection are sought out by people in different levels of consciousness. So even though people come to devotional service and they have so many desires, especially nowadays, more of a congregational movement, people come and they're still caught up in the midst of so many material activities, that Srila Prabhupada defines things in a very ideal way, because the Bhagavatam does the same. Just like most of us, if we read the second verse of the Bhagavatam, Dharma projita koitavata paramo nimat saranam satam. You have to be free from envy to read this book. Then, just, okay. How would we couldn't proceed. But it's giving the ideal. If you want to understand this Bhagavatam, and you haven't become free from envy, go back to Bhagavad Gita. The first symptom that Krishna gives in Bhagavad Gita of one who is dear to him is one is free from envy. Aveshta sarvabhutanam. Advesha sarvabhutanam. That free from envy. This is like the first thing you have to do, the first thing we have to work on constantly, to be free from envy. And then, if we understand Bhagavad Gita, we can have entrance into the Bhagavatam. But Srila Prabhupada was so anxious that the devotees would, in this lifetime, go back home, back to Godhead. He gave us Bhagavatam. He didn't make sure first that we all fully understood Bhagavad Gita before presenting the Bhagavatam. He presented the Bhagavatam. And then, even while presenting the Bhagavatam, knowing that he had a short time, he presented Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. And evidence of which it was difficult to understand, those who were in Los Angeles at the time, some devotees reading Chaitanya Charitamrita, they said, no more need for Bhagavad Gita. No, we'll just practice spontaneous devotional service. And the Gopi Baba Club, which Srila Prabhupada, when he heard about it, he came directly to Los Angeles and gave a series of classes which brought everybody back down to the level of where they should be, of practicing devotional service. So, in the same way, Srila Prabhupada is again and again throughout every purport and every part of the Bhagavatam establishing this parameter of pure devotional service and ecstasy. Of course, sometimes, even in kirtan, I see people say ecstatic kirtan, and sometimes that ecstatic I translate it as mode of passion. But anyway, it seems to be ecstatic, at least for the time when you're in the kirtan. But, this ecstasy is not so easy. But people, I've seen again and again, very young devotees, they read Bhagavatam, they go to the class, they think this is too arduous, this is too difficult. And they find someone who's practicing, something. Prabhupada says right here in so many places, one should be situated in spontaneous devotional service. Therefore, let me get, some elevated books or find some elevated teacher. This is too much drudgery, devotional drudgery, going through all these books, going systematically through 9 cantos to come to, let me jump. Exactly what Srila Prabhupada says not to do. And I'm seeing this more and more. People buying all these books that are available. One time I was in Ras Bihari Lal bookshop, and I wanted to I was looking for some copies of the Puranas, and I saw one devotee looking over these books from, I won't say who, but very elevated topics. And so I said, oh, you want this book? Yeah, certainly then you finished thoroughly examining Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and Chaitanya Charitamrita. Oh, no. I've read some parts of Bhagavad Gita, and I've heard a few Bhagavatam classes. But I heard this book is very, very wonderful. I said, yes, it is very wonderful. Once you have thoroughly studied Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and Chaitanya Charitamrita, just like Lord Brahma, he read the Vedas one time, came to Brahman realization, read it a second time, came to Paramatma realization, and the third time he came to Bhagavan realization. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he read Chaitanya Charitamrita 3 times and did the same thing. While he was still, working as a magistrate, and working for the government. So I said, when you can do that, then you might be qualified to read the book that you have in your hand. And so he put it back, and then I kept reading, and he was looking at me, and when I looked away, he grabbed the book and went and bought it. And so I don't know what happened after that. But anyway, so we have to be very careful. And therefore, Srila Prabhupada describes that the path of apavarga, or liberation, begins from the stage called moksha. Brahma bhuta prasanatmana shochiti nakangshati sama sarvashu bhuteshu mad bhaktir labate param. Those first 3 lines of that verse that Krishna gives in Bhagavad Gita are the stepping stones. You become liberated, Brahma bhuta prasanatma. You feel the bliss of being free from the modes of material nature. And the evidence of that, if you're wondering, am I on the Brahma bhuta platform? Well, nashochati nakangshati. You have no lamentation, you have no hankering. Otherwise, you're completely satisfied by chanting the holy name of Krishna. You see all living entities equally. There's no discrimination whatsoever on bodily platform or preferences in life or anything. No, then you can be elevated to the platform of devotional service. So therefore, the devotional service that we are practicing how can we be practicing if I'm not on that Brahmabhuta platform yet? This is called the mercy of the Acharya. By the mercy of the Acharya, we are situated. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that actually a Kanishta Adhikari is not actually a devotee, but they are placed on the platform of devotional service by the mercy of the spiritual master. Otherwise, that is their qualification. And therefore, one becomes a pure devotee by strictly following the pure devotee, and not by some external qualification. So, and then Srila Prabhupada says something so wonderful here. He says, if one wants to be happy within this material world, and then he goes through all this. For persons who are still inclined to enjoy material life in different stages on different planets, the stage of liberation in Bhakti Yoga is not recommended. So, I found that to be a very wonderful statement. Not recommended. Now, how can we say that Bhakti is not recommended? It means that, at least what I understood by reading this, that it's not going to be recommended to you. Otherwise, Prabhupada is saying you must do it, but your mind will not recommend it. And I've seen this so many times. I'm with devotees who are, struggling, and I sympathize, having to work in this world, take care of a family, make money. It's very understandable how material desires can very easily surface. Just like sometimes we pray to Krishna, please take away these material desires, but in the back of our mind, but not this one, and not this one, not this one. These four, just leave them there, Krishna. But you can take all the other ones away, no problem. So, Srila Prabhupada is emphasizing here in this purport. His purports are so wonderful that the activities on the path of Apavarga, up to the stage of Dharma, Artha, and Kama, are meant for sense gratification. So it seems strange that Dharmasya hyapavargyasya, as said in the beginning of the Bhagavatam, that Dharma, that real Dharma is apavarga. But here it seems to list things in the opposite order, Dharma, Artha, Kama. Generally speaking, if you're engaged in Kama and Artha, then Dharma is difficult. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada makes it clear that Artha and Kama, as it says in the Bhagavatam, that Artha and Kama are not the goal. They will come. But if you perform Dharma properly according to your level of realization in devotional service, then Artha and Kama will be there. But as recommended in the Bhagavatam, don't become distracted by these things. Understand that real Dharma means apavarga. It begins with apavarga. It begins with liberation. As Bilvamangala Thakur says, liberation, mukti swayam, mukali tangjali sevate sman. That liberation is standing with folded hands, just waiting for someone to serve the devotees, just waiting to serve the devotees. Srila Sanatana Goswami says in the beginning of his Brihad Bhagavatamrita, Jayati Jayati Krishna Prema Bhaktir Yarangrim, that pure devotional service. No, when one is situated in prema bhakti, then then one takes shelter at the lotus feet of Bhakti Devi, and that platform, because bhakti, this Krishna prema, nikila nigama tattvam gudam, that this elevated platform of Krishna prema is hidden away. It's not easy access. It's hidden away. And agyaya muktihi. And Mukti Devi has become aware of this. She has become aware. And therefore, bhajati sharana kama. She has taken shelter of Bhakti Devi. And this is especially in the age of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. She has taken shelter of Bhakti Devi because Vaishnavais tyajamana, because the Vaishnavas have rejected her. No, they have rejected her. They don't need her. So therefore she comes begging at the lotus feet of the Vaishnavas through Bhakti Devi. And Sanatana Goswami says something very wonderful in his purport. Sometimes acharyas have to write a purport because so that we can understand. So someone who's very elevated, they can just read the verses, and the great majority, they can read the purports. So he writes in his purport that that Mukti Devi is only looking at the lotus feet of Bhakti Devi. She can't see any higher. And this means that even if a devotee is engaged in the preliminary stages of devotional service, it is so powerful that it will take one beyond mukti. Otherwise, in Srila Prabhupada, if we read Srila Prabhupada's books, he emphasizes again and again and again. So, and then he says something very wonderful, that japa, yajana, tapasa, nyasa. These four activities, japa, generally practiced by the brahmacharis, yajana, sacrifices practiced by the grihastas, tapasa, austerities practiced by the vanaprasthas, and nyasa, renunciation practiced by the sannyasis, nishtam vihaya. She has given up her dependence on those things. Otherwise, previously, she would give liberation to brahmacharis who perfectly practiced mantras, or grihastas who were very, very, very serious in doing their yagyas perfectly. But she gave that up. Otherwise, you have to come to the platform of chanting the holy name. You have to come to the platform of devotional service. And then Mukti will be there to serve you, as Bilva Mangala Thakur says. So, and then Srila Prabhupada, here in his purport, he goes on to say that these practitioners who are attached to moksha, they want to merge into the Supreme. But this is also sense gratification. Just like Ramadas. There was one Ramadas when Gopal Bhatta Goswami was summoned by his own desire. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saw him when he was just a very young boy. And from that time, he was hankering. So he got the indication, now I can join Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Jagannath Puri. So he began his journey, and on the way, he met one apparent devotee, Ramadas, always chanting constantly the name of Lord Rama. And he was he was in ecstasy. And so he said, my dear Gopal Bhatta, let me carry your baggage for you. You know, let me carry your whatever small amount of. He said, no, you're a great devotee of Rama. But he insisted, so Gopal got to let him do it. They traveled all the way to Jagannath Puri. And then they met with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Immediately, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu embraced Gopal Bhatta, and tears were flowing from his eyes. And Gopal Bhatta was in total ecstasy. And then he simply looked at Ramadas and looked away. And Gopal Bhatta couldn't understand. You know, what? Here's this great devotee of Rama. And what's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu doing? And then later, this Ramadas, because he didn't feel like he was getting the mercy of Chaitanya, he came to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he said, my dear Lord, my only desire is to merge into your effulgence. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu just didn't pay much attention. So he was chanting the name of Rama, but because he didn't understand, and that understanding will be emphasized in the next verses, the understanding is surrender. If you understand the real purpose of chanting and glorifying Krishna, it is to surrender. Srila Prabhupada, on 3 occasions that I read and heard in his lectures, he would speak about Tadvidi Pranipatena Pariprashnena Sevaya. So he said, first, there is Paripratena, no? Pranipatena, you must have a submissive attitude. He said, next is Sevaya. You do service, you surrender. Then your prashna, your questions will be relevant. Otherwise, Prabhupada said that my Guru Maharaj was like an encyclopedia. He could answer any question. But Prabhupada said, but do not waste the time of the spiritual master with unnecessary questions. Srila Prabhupada, so many times in his lectures, and when he asked for questions, somebody would ask a question, and Prabhupada said, this is not a good question. Because it's not pertaining to the verse. The whole idea of questions was not just, I had some curiosity about something. No. The idea is, how do I understand this verse of Bhagavatam in such a way that it can, be relevant to my advancement in spiritual life? How can I understand it? So Srila Prabhupada concludes, when one goes above the stage of liberation, and he at once becomes one of the associates of the Lord to render transcendental loving service. So here again, Srila Prabhupada is defining in a very concrete way what is devotional service. What is, that is technically called vimukti. So in the 6th canto, this word vimukti is one verse, which I also can't remember right now. But Srila Prabhupada defines vimukti as going back home, back to Godhead. Mukti, but vimukti, the real, the elevated platform of mukti, the real liberation, means, and Srila Prabhupada again shows how this is so rarely achieved. One becomes a personal associate of the Lord. That is like not so easy to do. I mean, it's not. So Srila Prabhupada is giving us an idea. What does it mean to be a devotee? What does it mean? It's a very, very elevated platform. Not like, I chant 16 rounds and I, follow the 4 regulative principles. This is like, entry platform of some kind of devotional service. It's like, it's not like, it's not, but we sometimes think, now I'm a devotee. And so, whereas real devotees, they don't think I'm a devotee. They think, we see Bhaktivinoda Thakur in his song Gopinath. Here I am wallowing in the mire of sense gratification. And so, otherwise, how will I achieve Gopinath if I'm on this platform of sense gratification, of desiring to enjoy this material world? So therefore, Srila Prabhupada concludes, Narada Muni recommends that one directly engage himself in devotional service. And, of course, Dhruva Maharaj, he's in a different age. So Narada Muni defined a process which would free him from his desire, which he states in his prayers to Lord Vishnu. After meeting Lord Vishnu, after being touched on the head by the conch shell of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then he says, what is that verse? But the first line, Stana Bilasite, Stana Bilasite, I can't remember the whole verse, but Tapasi, that I had the desires, I had this desire, and I performed great austerities, what is it? Tam Pratap Mam Devamunindra Guyam. And I did a level of austerity and penance that even great devas and munis and controllers within this universe cannot achieve. But then, Kachan Bachin Van Api Divya Ratnam. But then I realized that everything I'm aspiring for in this material world, with all this mechanical process of devotional service, which is going to be defined, this mechanical process of trying to come to the stage of bhakti through some external means. Bhakti Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha Yasu Vairagyam Jnanam Chaya Dahaitukam. That Bhakti Yoga, if you practice it properly, then jnana and vairagya will become manifest. You don't have to do it separately. If you did it separately, it can help your bhakti. It can, it can support bhakti, but it doesn't create bhakti. On the total contrary, that bhakti creates real vairagya and real jnana. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in his conversation with Ramananda Roy, he says when he accepts the first proposition of Ramananda Roy, he accepts jnane prayasam. When you give up this jnana, then, I think I may have left my phone on my bag. Sorry about that. You can just click the button on the side and it will stop ringing. Thank you. Sorry about that disturbance. He accepts that when you go beyond gyan, otherwise whatever gyan you can cultivate through your mind and your intelligence, some people become very attached to the intellectual platform. Some people, as Srila Prabhupada begins, some people become attached to the karmic platform, or the jnana platform, or the yogi platform. But none of them, Srila Prabhupada is emphasizing, none of them are acceptable. The only platform that will bring you real satisfaction is devotional service. So, these are some thoughts on this particular verse. I'll stop here. I'm just thinking as I see this book. One time I was in Dallas, Tamal Krishna Maharaj picked up the public Bhagavad Gita. It was like kind of in this condition. You know. And he said, then he got out his Bhagavad Gita, he said, I've been using this for 20 years. You know, 20 years. And it was like perfect condition. He said, that is why Srila Prabhupada said proprietorship turns sand into gold. You know. So we have to be very careful that Krishna's energy, what to speak of the Bhagavatam, which is the personification of Krishna in literary form. Just want to share this. It was so nice. When I was in Budapest, when I sat down to give the Bhagavatam class, they brought the Bhagavatam off the altar on a silver platter covered with silk. You know, and then, you know, it was very carefully, you know, you just see it like that. You open it up very carefully. And, you know, not like, but anyway. So, thank you all very much.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. You can turn this down a bit, it's a little too loud. Thank you for a wonderful class, but it opens up something that's considered controversial in ISKCON, because there are still devotees in ISKCON who think that we were not with Krishna originally, we came from the Brahmajyoti. But this exchange that you just brought up with Gopal Bhatta and Lord Chaitanya and that Ram Bhakta almost undeniably proves otherwise. Because if wanting to go to the Brahman is a contaminated desire, so much so that the Lord wouldn't even touch him, didn't even want to look at him, how can you say we came from there? That means that we came from a contaminated state. It was not a pure state. It's not a high state. If going back there is not desirable, if it's contaminated, if it's not, so much so the Lord doesn't even want to look at somebody who has that desire to go to the Brahman, then how can you say that we started from Brahman? That means that we started out in an imperfect state, and that's not supported by Shastra. Shastra says that we start perfect. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhya Kabunai. The love for Krishna is eternally there in the heart of the living entity. So you can't start from an imperfect state if love for Krishna is in your heart. How can anybody accept that? It really baffles me. That still in ISKCON there are some people who think that we came from Brahman, instead of what Prabhupada clearly indicates that we were with Krishna and now we're going back to Krishna. So maybe you can, I know it's a controversial topic, it could take a long time to discuss, but maybe you could just shed a little bit, because you're such an elevated speaker, maybe you can just say a few words to calm my mind, because I can't understand it. This exchange that you just brought up solidifies in my mind that we could not have come from Brahman, because the Lord himself is saying, you're an idiot, in other words. He didn't tell him in so many words, but he told that Ram Bhakta, you're an idiot for wanting to go to Brahman. So if you're an idiot for wanting to go to Brahman, how can you have come from Brahman? That means you started in an idiotic state.
Well, that's a highly controversial subject. One can also say, how can one be a Nitya Siddha and then become a non-Nitya Siddha? So you can approach it from different angles. You know? And therefore Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, you will understand it when you get there. You know? Just like Srila Prabhupada, he gave one class during the Gopi Baba time, yes. And one devotee asked, I heard this on a tape, one devotee said, Srila Prabhupada, if one is an eggplant in the spiritual world, what happens when Krishna eats you? And Prabhupada said, when you get there, you will find out. You know? So, yeah. 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 So anyway, as far as that question goes, I see two very distinct ways of looking at it, you know? And both are supported by Shastra. You know? Otherwise, every Vaishnava except ISKCON says that we come from pure consciousness to the material world, and then we go back home, back to Godhead. And ISKCON says something different. So, you know, so I prefer not to get into those subjects. And actually, myself and two other devotees. We made made a proposal which always got tabled like 3 times, that let the devotees understand it according to their own realization, because Prabhupada says both things. So, anyway, that's how I approach it. Hare Krishna. Anyone else? Oh, there's in the back. Okay.
Hare Krishna. Oftentimes we see that devotees, through the performance of the devotional service, because there is austerity, they get these opulences, and then they become temporarily bewildered by them or sidetracked. So there are different explanations on why these opulences come and how devotees should deal with them. Like also there's ecstasy, there's CDs, there's different types of mystical powers that you may just acquire as a side product of your devotional service. But then it's easy to get a little carried away, a little infatuated by these, and kind of lose track of the real goal and the purity of the process. How to safeguard against that?
Hearing and chanting and associating with devotees who we see are progressive. I remember one devotee, I won't mention the names, but one devotee was speaking about another devotee who was really fixed up in devotional service. And he said, he's playing with a full deck, so with a full deck, otherwise full deck of cards, So, meaning that he's doing everything in the right way. And you can see that, I've seen, when I see devotees who are very fixed in devotional service, they're not presumptuous, they're not, they're just satisfied. Just like when you saw Jayananda Prabhu, you just saw surrender. There was no ostentatious performance of devotional service. It was just, you could see the surrender. And nothing fancy, nothing flamboyant, just attached to serving Krishna. And those are the kind of devotees that we should look to and associate with. They're just fixed in their service. And sometimes when I see even a very new devotee who is just enthusiastically performing devotional service, such very enthusiastic, very enlivening. And it's not something, but sometimes people, when they're lacking in satisfaction in devotional service, then you see this tendency to go to an extreme, go to some extreme, and or always looking for something more, something different. And when devotional service actually increases exponentially when we're just doing the same thing with the satisfaction of pleasing Sri Guru and Gauranga. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for the class. In the purport, Prabhupada was talking, if you have any other desires for different platforms of yoga progression, like the yoga ladder from Bhagavad Gita, that you're not even eligible for bhakti, devotional service. And I was reading in the Brihad Bhagavatam the other day, at the beginning of the volume 2, where Uttara is asking where Goloka Vrindavan is. She gives a 10 verses delineation of the progress in devotional service. And she says this really interesting verse that says, she kind of discredits, first off, Sankhya and yoga practices because it's just mechanical. And then she says, even if the devotees have, along the lines of, even if the devotees have material desires, they can fulfill them and then progress onto unalloyed devotional service. I was wondering if you could speak about how, we could be a devotee, we still fulfill our material desires in this lifetime, get rid of them, and then go on to unalloyed devotional service in context of this verse that you were speaking of today?
Well, I mean, Krishna says that you don't get rid of them by a mechanical process. You get rid of them by by param drishtva nivartate, by tasting something more blissful, and by becoming gradually more elevated in devotional service. And otherwise, for a devotee who's satisfied in devotional service, it may seem like they're doing something very mechanical. They're doing the same thing every day. And so that seems very mechanical. Or just like someone may be a brahmachari and distributing hundreds of books, and then they get married and they're not distributing any books. No. But if they're hearing from the Bhagavatam, they're performing their external duties, as I just mentioned, as Rupa Goswami says, Nikinasvasya Vastasu, they may appear to be like anyone else, just like Ramananda Roy. He looked like a government man, but he was, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu chose him to speak about Radha and Krishna. And so it may appear to be the same thing. It may appear to be mechanical, but the internal development is going on constantly. So that's how I understand it. And if one has material desires, then by following what Srila Prabhupada has outlined for us and all of our acharyas, then those material desires will become, they'll just become, just like I always give the example of children. Children, they have a toy, like a 2-year-old. They have a toy, you try to take it away and they throw a tantrum. But you give them a different toy, a more sophisticated toy, give it up. So that principle is there. We see it all through our life. That even on the material platform, we give something inferior up and we get something better. And so, that's how I understand it. Thank you. Hare Krishna. So we've already gone over time, so I'll stop here. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanande.